It is interesting how much the gaming conversation has entered into this space. And in fact, I think it's about a third of FOSI's membership are now gaming companies. So, and as you saw from the research this morning, it's a major impact, has a major impact on kids' well-being, both positive and negative, but mostly positive. So, given the theme of our conference, the next panel is particularly relevant to our discussions. And to help steer the conversation, I'd like to introduce McKenzie. Maya is the Senior Counsel of Tech Policy at the Entertainment Software Association, where she leads video game console makers and publishers in the development of legislative and regulatory policy on emerging issues in technology, including privacy, e-commerce, and trust and safety. Prior to joining ESA, Maya was an associate at DLA Piper and Paul Hastings, where she focused on privacy and cybersecurity. And most importantly, she is a proud HBCU alum of Alabama State University. Go Hornets. Please join me in welcoming the next panel. Good luck.
Hi again. Hi again.
Hello, FOSI. Let's be friends this evening, or this afternoon. Well, hello, everyone. I am excited and honored to be representing the Entertainment Software Association at this year's FOSI conference. This year, ESA is celebrating 30 years as an association. And over the last 3 decades, video games have evolved significantly into fully immersive, innovative, and creative products. Now, as video games have pushed the boundaries of entertainment, they've also created new opportunities for connection and collaboration with the introduction of online play. So we're here with our esteemed panelists to have a conversation about the history of the industry's commitment to online safety, how that approach has empowered players, and the important considerations that policymakers are taking into account when considering enacting policy targeted towards protecting kids and families online. So I am joined by these 3 esteemed panelists, and we'll start to my left with Blair Durkee.
Hi everyone, I'm Blair Durkee. I'm the Associate Director of Gaming for GLAAD. If you don't know, GLAAD is the world's largest LGBTQ media advocacy association. We're a 40-year-old nonprofit, and when we were founded in 1985, it was with the knowledge that so much of the bias and the animus against our community is rooted in misinformation and misunderstanding about our community that often comes through the media. And so we've worked for 40 years now to ensure that first of all, that our LGBTQ stories are told in media, but that they're told fairly and accurately. So I've been leading our gaming division at GLAAD for about 7 years now, working with industry stakeholders to ensure that LGBTQ stories are told fairly and accurately, and educating about LGBTQ players and how we can better reach them and engage them as they play online.
And next we have Virginia Delegate Michelle Maldonado.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here. I'm Delegate Michelle Lopes Maldonado, and I always start out by saying I'm a recovering tech lawyer. It's been a while. Mostly worked early on in the tech industry, both as a lawyer, really cutting my teeth on online privacy, back-end platform technologies, and e-commerce. And in the Virginia State Legislature, I founded our Technology and Innovation Caucus, which is intended to help educate our legislators on these very cutting-edge issues. And this year, I was really pleased to be able to pass Virginia's very first Online Child Data Privacy Act. So.
And no stranger to the stage.
Do I need to repeat? I'm Pat Vance. I'm president of the Entertainment Software Rating Board and chair of the International Age Rating Coalition.
All right, so let's begin. Entertaining the world is a privilege that the video game industry takes very seriously. Now, while the average age of a video game player is 36 years old, we know that kids love to play games too. Considering that more than 3/4 of Gen Alpha and Gen Z play video games regularly, the industry has taken affirmative steps to invest in tools and resources to protect all consumers, but especially kids, which is different than some other industries. So Pat, Tell us about the video game industry's history and commitment to providing consumers, especially our youngest gamers, with information and tools to keep them safe.
Yeah, well, for the last 30 years, Entertainment Software Rating Board has been assigning ratings. The rating system has evolved quite a bit over the 30 years. Started out with age ratings and content descriptors, and then we added the interactive elements that I mentioned on the last panel. We also have something that's critically important, which is called the Advertising Review Council, which is monitors enforcement and enforces marketing compliance with the marketing guidelines that the industry has adopted. So everything from making sure that ratings are displayed on all ads to where ads, particularly for the mature rated video games, are targeted. That's an active and very important program. Our rating system actually has an enforcement component. We can fine companies, we sanction companies for not complying with our ratings disclosure rules as well as with our advertising rules. We also started a retail program about 20 years ago where we work with retailers across the country to make sure that they're enforcing store policies not to sell mature rated video games to kids. We also have we're one of the first COPPA Safe Harbor programs whereby we are helping companies with online products and services comply with not just COPPA but privacy regulations here and abroad. We also do a lot of consumer education on behalf of the industry, particularly consumer-facing education to make sure the parents are aware of the ratings, using them, we've gotten very high awareness and use over the years. We're now at 84% awareness among parents, and 78% of parents say they use the ratings either all the time or most of the time. So that's pretty good.
Yeah. So parents aren't the only folks, though, who are taking notice of what the video game industry and its surrounding infrastructure has done. Kids' online safety has been a huge topic in state houses and on Capitol Hill this year. Earlier this year, the White House Kids Online Health Safety Task Force issued a report that lauded the video game industry and stated, I quote, want to be sure I get this right, social media and other online platforms should learn from video games and provide proactive, easy to understand information about their features and age appropriateness. So that's a pretty strong statement from a pretty strong body. Delegate Maldonado, when you think about online safety as a policymaker, what should other industries learn from video games, and what do you want to see industry doing before policymakers have to step in and regulate?
That's a really great question. At first, I want to say is that what Pat just said and what you just said, that's what it looks like when you've been doing this for several decades, right? And so you get to learn how to do proper disclosures, how to put incentives in for proper behaviors online, and what those consequences are. What I'd love to see done better outside of the gaming platform that we could pull forward is some of those things. What you may have seen is that people are having a hard time in state legislatures trying to figure out how do we protect our kids online, how do we protect their mental health, how do we protect them from accessing material that's not appropriate for them. There's some really great groundwork that's already been done in the gaming industry that we can pull from. Part of the challenge, though, is that what you see is so many have tried to make strides, and those efforts end up in court being challenged on First Amendment grounds. So the question we have to figure out is, are there definitions we need to change? What is obscene, what is harm to children, so that we can have access while at the same time preserving constitutional rights? I also think that before we even get to that place, there are already organizations who are, whether it's IG, Instagram, or it's TikTok, who are putting things in there like, hey, we just saw this with our panel with some of our younger folks around creating friction. I think not everything has to be legislated. I would really love to see more private public sector collaboration, because I think that is the best way, and that collaboration must include people not just in the gaming industry, not just in the tech industry, but other perspectives, so that we have a holistic approach.
Yeah, so we just covered what industry's doing. We just covered how policymakers are thinking about this, what they want to see. But let's drill down on the real world impact. So Blair, investing in creating safe spaces and educating kids on making safe choices also has that very, tangible real world impact. Could you tell us how this supports community building, particularly among marginalized groups?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it is important to keep marginalized groups at the forefront of this conversation as we're having it. Obviously, at GLAAD, our focus is on the LGBTQ community and LGBTQ youth. And just sort of underscore how important this cohort is, the CDC put out a report last year looking at high school students in the US and found that 26%, or 1 in 4 high school students, are LGBTQ. And that is a figure that has been replicated again and again, finding that anywhere from 25 to 30% of Gen Z or older Gen Alpha now, we're starting to get data on, are LGBTQ. And so this is a very important and significant cohort among youth. And yet, I feel like they're often excluded from the conversation when it comes to online safety. And I hate to say it, but often also become collateral damage in a lot of these cases. I don't want to say that for LGBTQ youth, the set of concerns are completely different. Of course, all the same things about exposure to predators online, those sorts of things are still true. But a huge portion of the concerns around online safety comes to access and making sure that LGBTQ youth have access to accepting spaces and to knowledge and information about how to be who they are. They need to be given the language to understand who they are. It's a very vulnerable time in their lives. So I'm a millennial, so I grew up in the time of the height of the moral panic over video game violence. And I think that's an instructive example as we think about shaping public policy, because as we know now, in hindsight, that whole idea of video game violence leading to real-world violence has been debunked again and again. But I think it's an instructive example, because have we truly learned from that? I don't think it's fair to say that everyone that pushed that idea was doing so in bad faith. I think people saw a concern, they raised the concern, and they meant it legitimately. Unfortunately, the impact of that concern, or the impact of the policies that were put forward, didn't necessarily have have a positive impact. And so as we think about our policies today, I would encourage all of us to sort of have that gut check moment of, okay, we see something that looks concerning to us. Is the policy that we're proposing to address this concern beneficial, or is it harmful? Is it restricting access to important spaces and information that LGBTQ youth in particular need? And video games have been an incredible lifeline in that regard. It's almost difficult for me to talk about this in terms of data, because it's such of my personal life experience. I'm a transgender woman, and I grew up in a family and an environment that was very hostile to LGBTQ identity in the community. And video games were a lifeline for me. I truly can say that I don't know where I would be today without video games. That's what got me through. And there's so many aspects about the participatory nature of video games, the fact that it gives you an outlet to explore and express yourself, that makes video games uniquely powerful as an entertainment medium. And also online games, the fact that gaming becomes a lifestyle for so many people, including myself. It's where you find community, and it's where you find that sense of belonging, that so important third rung on Maslow's hierarchy. Find a place where you belong, because that's not always the case for LGBTQ youth. And so games fill a vital gap in that infrastructure for supporting our kids.
Sticking with some of the themes that we've heard throughout the day, teens want to be involved in making decisions about, their online experiences. And I think earlier I heard someone say, give teens credit, they want to be involved. So let's focus a little bit on this idea of digital citizenship, especially for older kids or teenagers. And so, Delegate Maldonado, from a policy perspective, how do you approach drafting smart policy that balances the need to put protections in place, but it doesn't inhibit this self-expression or the ability to make responsible choices online, particularly when a game may be the only place where that teen experiences the opportunity to fully be themselves?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, we need to have them at the table, They need to be part of the conversation. And I cannot tell you how many times people say, where are the younger folks in the room? Oh, there they are. They're in the back, and we have given the subliminal message or the direct message is you sit there, be quiet, and listen, right? That's inappropriate. Those days are over. We need all the appropriate voices at the table. And our Gen Z and our Gen Alpha, they are critical to help us create policies that allow for flourishing and that are human-centric and human-first. And so I think around this space, what we could see is how do we allow them, one, to be at the table. Then we need to see where are the places that folks are most active that balances whether it's constitutional rights, rights of expression, with how do we want to have civil society norms. And the question that always rubs up against one another is, whose norms, whose values get to control? And the reality is that we are not a melting pot, we are a salad bowl, right? And I'm always talking about integration, not assimilation. And integration allows all of us to show up fully, as we are, and the gaming platforms and the policies and regulatory frameworks around them, we can make them breathable and flexible to allow for that, or we can make them very strict and preventative and sort of smothering. So I think those two things are important. The next thing I would say is that as policymakers, the one thing that is always at the top of our minds is the mental health of our kids and the mental health of our young adults. And that runs across our LGBTQ plus youth, our youth who are questioning, our youth who just feel alone because we have a loneliness epidemic happening right now that was exacerbated by COVID. And we have to figure out how do we allow people to write policy that still allows them to feel like they belong, that is a bridge between the virtual world and the physical world. And in those policies, I think they should be incentivized to take action. There are places, obviously, where we want to have a heavy hand, but I always like that to be the last resort. But I think when we give carrots versus sticks, we tend to come out of it, the co-creative process, a lot better.
Well, thank you all for those wonderful insights. And so as we transition to discussing more about how we can empower our players to find their community, I want to prompt you all that Q&A time is coming up. And so I know you have questions for this amazing set of panelists. So we're all here, you all included, because we work in online safety, and we are deeply focused on solving some very important and complex issues in this space. But one thing that often gets overlooked when we're discussing the challenges in getting online safety right are the benefits of the interactive entertainment environment and how these benefits run to players of all ages. Our own research has shown that playing video games can promote problem solving and cognitive teamwork and collaboration skills. Third-party research has also shown that playing video games teaches kids to learn how to learn, and also promotes careers in STEM fields. So since the theme of this year's conference is From Protection to Empowerment, and at ESA, we truly believe that the commitments the industry has made to player safety over the last 3 decades lay the foundation for gamers of every age, race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation to be able to have positive experiences while playing. So whether that means learning a new skill, about a new culture in a video game, or connecting with others to just simply find joy through play. All right, so Blair, ESA's latest report, The Essential Facts in the US Video Game Industry, illustrated the idea that everyone plays and that in video games, there's a space for everyone. In fact, as you quoted earlier, about 17% of Gen Z video game players identify as being a part of the LGBTQ plus community. Under your leadership at GLAAD, you recently published a report titled The State of LGBTQ Inclusion in Video Games. Could you tell us about your research and what you found about how games can be a way to cope and create safe spaces for self-expression and belonging?
Yeah, absolutely. We found that video games were an incredibly positive force in the lives of LGBTQ gamers and all gamers, as you would expect. On top of the benefits that you just mentioned, Maya, there's a whole host of additional benefits to LGBTQ gamers in terms of giving that outlet for them to explore and express themselves. And when in a time and in a day and age where the broader public policy landscape has largely turned against LGBTQ youth. We've seen over 100 bills that are hostile toward LGBTQ youth passed across this country over the last several years, and the outlook is looking worse over the short term. So it really is more important now that the private industries like gaming step up and fill the gap to provide that refuge, that safe space, and games so often are that for our community. And I do encourage everyone here to go read our research report. It's on GLAAD.org. There's lots of great numbers there to back up what I'm talking about. For this panel, though, I thought it'd be helpful maybe just to give a couple of quick examples of how this works in practice. I would say there's two main ways that games benefit LGBTQ players. The first is that ability to see themselves and also to express themselves in a game. My favorite example, even though I know it's the one that comes up every time we have this conversation, but I think it's interesting to look at The Sims, which came out 24 years ago in the year 2000. That game had the ability, and I think everyone knows this game, it's a life simulation game. You can create characters, they fall in love and get married and have a career and hobbies. But from day one, that series had support for same-sex relationships, which was quite astonishing in the year 2000. I mean, that was, back then, same-sex marriage was illegal in all 50 states. 60% of the country said that same-sex relationships were immoral. And yet, here was a game for teens and up that had that in it. And I honestly give a lot of credit to the ESRB. I don't have any inside information here about how much this was or wasn't a discussion. But the fact that that game got a teen rating, despite the fact that it had that content in it in the year 2000, was an enormous, it changed the trajectory not just of the gaming industry, but of so many people's lives. I know.
Sex is sex.
It's woohoo in The Sims. It's a little different.
But yeah, it's just woohoo. It's just woohoo, and you can't see anything. It's just under the covers.
Exactly, yes. But I know so many people my age who are LGBTQ who have stories of playing The Sims and seeing a possibility for their lives and their future for the very first time in a piece of age-appropriate media. And it's an amazing fact, but it's also a sad indictment of just how LGBTQ people have been excluded from the discussion around age-appropriate ratings and things like that historically. Of course, we're getting much better at it now. I want to give one more example just about online spaces, because that has been a huge change we've seen. So The Sims continues to be a single-player game, although there are online communities that form around it. Recently, we saw something called the Dream SMP. I don't know if anyone knows what that is. If you are or were the parent of a teen during pandemic lockdown, you probably have heard of this. It was essentially a collaborative storytelling medium that was among 30 different creators on YouTube and Twitch. And they told stories in the game Minecraft. And they created videos and live streaming content around it. And there was an entire community that formed around this, both as a whole, and even in the followings of each individual specific creator. And one of those creators is named Erit, and they came out as bisexual and gender fluid in the fall of 2020 and gained a huge following of LGBTQ gamers, teen gamers. And their community turned into a sort of informal support group and a place for solidarity. And I want to talk about this because I think a lot of people, especially if you're a parent, you wonder, like, what are my kids doing online? What are they saying online? And if I want to do something a little bit unorthodox, if that's okay, and pull back the curtain a little bit, because I went on one of these live streams that took place. It was, I think, around 2021, and just pulled out a few of the comments that teens were saying in this chat. There were thousands of viewers in this stream. Some of them were positive. One said to Erit, "I came out to my mom yesterday, so I'm out to my entire family now. I couldn't have done this without your streams. Thank you so much." Another says, "Erit honestly has played a huge part in me being more comfortable being non-binary." And some had concerns or were asking for advice, like, "Erit, I want to come out to my grandparents, but I'm scared. hi, I kind of want to come out as bisexual to my mom, but I don't know if she's going to accept me. Can you please give me some advice? Hi, Erin, I came out as trans to my mom a few hours ago and she wasn't accepting. I want a pride flag for my room, but my family are homophobic. Little do they know they have a lesbian teenager. Erin, I really want to come out to my family, but I know they won't support. I'm not really sure what to do. These were comments that were left on a Twitch live stream of a Minecraft gameplay. And I think this is both an indictment of the way that society and adults have failed these LGBTQ teens, but also a sign of how video games are forming these communities in the lieu of that support. And games, I think, will continue to be a powerful space for teens to find that solidarity and community going forward.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing those quotes, Blair. I think that just goes to show, as much as we focus on the power of play, there's also the power of community and being a respite, and for some gamers, even being a home. So, final question for Pat. Building off of the findings of that GLAAD report, the ESRB research, what are you seeing about how effectively parents are able to manage their children's game experiences, and how is the video game industry making it easier for them?
Well, yeah, we do research every year. In fact, we just released this year's research today. We're finding that, as I said in the previous panel, that more and more parents are actively engaged with their children around games. They're playing with their games 75% of the time. 75% of parents say they play regularly with their kids. They're playing games before making decisions about what's appropriate. They're playing them themselves, which I think is critical. It's also, the challenges around games today tend to focus around managing the amount of time, managing who my child's playing with, and there are great tools to use that, to manage that. Also, finding age-appropriate games, and that's across all devices, mobile as well as, consoles. And ratings are just one part of that. But, going beyond just what's age-appropriate from a content standpoint, also what's age-appropriate in terms of difficulty, what's age-appropriate in terms of the types of communities that might play those games. So I think that there are, a lot of things that parents are finding to be very helpful, but there are also still some gaps.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we have time for one question before we wrap, and I just want to thank this amazing panel today for these wonderful insights that you shared. Do we have any questions from the audience?
There's one down there. There's one down there.
We have one right here. Once you get the mic, if you could tell us who you are and share your question.
Hi. Thank you so much for the panelists. You all were, your words are just very inspiring. My name is Lindsay Smith. I'm a recent graduate from American University here in DC, and I'm currently getting my master's in mental health at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. And I have a broad question, but really to speak towards people of Gen Z who see some of these effects of whether it be from social media or gaming in the terms of like the loneliness epidemic. There are gaps that are still here that we can work on, essentially. And I'm just wondering, as a bystander, someone who sees how video games are impacting my younger siblings and how, in this digital world, even as a 21-year-old, the experience is very different from someone who's 16, 17. I'm just wondering, do you have any advice for people who want to contribute to this empowerment movement to help people who are vulnerable, potentially in this stage?
So I think there are many ways we can get involved, and I think involvement is so important because it is the holding of this space and the people in it that makes the experience one that is healthier. I'll just share this one thing that I think is important as we evolve these games going forward and what that looks like for people getting involved. So both my husband and I come from tech, so it's no surprise that our son is in game design as a major at school. And after COVID, what he learned was, he said that the gaming helped him work through his trauma. And he said, if you can find the right music, find the right storyline, and the right imagery, those combinations coupled together can create an arc of a story and a journey that helps people be entertained as well as address some of their mental health issues, some of their social issues. So I think that is something we can infuse in, and I think the more we get involved together, regardless of age, we help to inform not just the narrative, but the experience itself.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Delegate Maldonado, Blair, Pat, for your thoughtful sharing during today's discussion. And before we break, I just want to remind you, we mentioned some pretty awesome resources that are out there. You can visit GLAAD's website to learn more about their report. You can visit ESRB's website to learn about the broad range of resources for parents, and then ESA's website for our Trust and Safety Hub that lists all of the industry's activities in this space. Thank you so much for being a great audience.